Hi everyone, my name is Nancy and I'd like to welcome you to my new channel here on YouTube. For my first video, I'd like to share with you how I created this card using Simon Says Stamp products and Distress Oxide inks. So to get started, we're going to die cut a piece of vellum using the Simon Says Stamp Outline Clustered Leaves die, and we'll hold that down using some washi tape. You can use any low-tack tape that you have. And our next die cut will be from a piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock using the Simon Says Stamp Clustered Leaves die and the Oh Happy Day tag die. I took a full sheet and I cut it in half to die cut both pieces at the same time. Next we need to die cut our pieces. I'll be using the Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. It's brand new, so I had a little trouble getting it through, but it works really nicely. I like this machine. Okay, so now that we have our pieces die cut, we'll put those two aside so we can start splattering our white leaves using Distress Oxide inks in Picked Raspberry, Spiced Marmalade, and Mustard Seed. If you don't have the Oxide inks, you can use the regular Distress inks or any water-soluble ink that you have. So now you spray it with some water, and using a number 4 round brush, you start creating your splatters on your leaves. So while you watch me splatter, I'd like to take this opportunity and thank you for clicking on my video and giving it a chance. I know that there's so many talented card makers here on YouTube, so for me, you taking the time to watch my video is really appreciated. So once we're done with our splattering, we'll put this aside to dry so that we can start working on our background. Using a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock cut bigger than A2 size, apply a little adhesive to the back of it so that it stays put in your stamping platform. And for spacing, I did use the L ruler from the Misty Creative Corner pieces. On the Misty door, I already have the Simon Says Stamp wide stripe background stamp in position. And using a sponge tool, we're going to start applying the Picked Raspberry, covering the first row completely, and then pretty much almost the whole second row, just leaving the top edge without any ink because we're going to cover that with the Spiced Marmalade. For the third stripe and halfway up the fourth stripe, we'll also be inking that up in the Spiced Marmalade. And then the rest of the stripes we'll cover with the Mustard Seed. As you can see, I'm inking it pretty heavily because it does stamp lightly. Now we'll move on to Mustard Seed. And just like we do on paper, you want to blend the colors on the stamp to avoid harsh lines, which can make it harder to blend later on. So we'll just continue adding ink and ink blending until we're satisfied with the way that it looks. Ink blend it just a little bit more there, and then we'll close the door and press down pretty firmly because this is a big stamp. And you're going to see that it does come out pretty light, like I said. That's why I did it 3 times, the same process, just to give it nice coverage. Although I have to say that it really does look nice like this. But since we're going to ink blend over that, if you leave it this light, you won't see it at the end. Okay, so now that we've stamped our background 3 times and we're happy with the way that it looks, we'll remove it off of our stamp platform so that we can start ink blending our background. Now, depending on how saturated your sponges are, you don't want to re-ink them if you don't have to. The whole point is that you want to ink blend but still see the stripes behind the ink blending. Mine were pretty saturated at this point because this was the 3rd time of me creating this background, because I kept re-inking and then completely covering my stripes. So again, you want to go on lightly and reapply color if it's still not dark enough. So now, just like the rest of the card, we're starting with the Picked Raspberry, going on to the Spiced Marmalade, and then finishing off with the Mustard Seed. And of course, go back and blend more until it's nice and smooth. Okay, so now that our background panel is done and off to the side drying, we can start working on our tag. Using the same colors, we're going to stamp each one onto our work surface pretty close to each other to allow us to get all three colors onto our stamps at the same time. But we'll need to lighten up the ink a little, so we're going to use our paintbrush and water either from the same spray bottle or a bowl to give us more control over how much water we add to the ink. Because the first tag I made, I used the water sprayer and way too much water came out and it diluted the ink a little too much. So it didn't give me a good impression on the tag. So for me, I found that this gave me the most control. The floral images that we'll be using come from the Simon Says Stamp Delicate Flowers stamp set. I already have them mounted onto acrylic blocks, so we can just start inking up our stamp by tapping into all three colors and making sure that you overlap each color just a bit. And when you stamp it down onto your tag, you'll see that all three have blended really nicely. And then of course we'll do that for the second stamp. And you just blend into each color and keep checking to make sure that you do get ink on it because the lines of the stamp are pretty thin. And we'll stamp this down on the lower left-hand corner of the tag and then put it aside to dry. The tag should be dry in like about 5 or 10 minutes, so we'll get a piece of twine and cut that down to like about 9 inches long, and then fold that in half and thread it through the hole at the top of the tag, and then we can start preparing our background and finish putting our card together. I went ahead and glued the vellum outline leaves to the clustered leaves and then cut the two ends off. As you can see, I didn't glue down the top of the leaves together because I like the dimension that the floating leaves create. Next, we'll cut our panel down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 to give us that nice white border. And just in case you're wondering why I didn't cut the panel down from the beginning, it's because it allows me to cut off the dark edges from all the ink blending we did earlier for that nice clean look. Now we'll apply Scotch foam tape to the back of the tag for dimension, making sure that we apply it wherever we can for that extra stability, because it's always in the areas that we don't apply it where it gets wrinkled somehow, at least for me anyway. Okay, so now that we have everything ready to go, it's time to start putting our card together. Taking one of the clustered leaves, we're going to position it behind the tag, making sure that the stem of the leaves doesn't show through the letters on the tag. And then once we're happy with the way that it looks, we can glue it down using liquid glue. I'm using the Gina K Connect glue and only applying it to the end of the stem and on the first leaf. You can, of course, add glue to the rest of the leaves if you'd like. Moving on to the second cluster of leaves, let's glue that down behind the left corner of the tag. And now we can remove the release paper from the foam tape and place the tag in the center, making sure one more time that we don't see the stems through the letters, and then press it down in place. Next, we'll glue down our twine to the card front and trim the ends off that stick out past the card front. And finally, we'll apply adhesive to the back of our card front and center it to a side fold card base, which measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And our card is done. Again, many thanks for watching my first video. I'm so excited to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. And until next time, bye!